Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Master Runeterra Squadcast. Of course, I'm your host, MonteXristo. Tonight, I'm joined by regular Phansora and two new faces, one of whom you might have seen a few times, Mr.eMOEtional. Mo, how you doing tonight?
I'm good.
Oh wait.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to be on here.
Glad to have you on finally. I've wanted to have you on this podcast for a while after you so graciously had me on your first episode when you were doing the All Heart No Fluff.
Mm-hmm.
So happy to be able to do another podcast with you. And another face who you guys probably haven't seen before, Swiffer9000, recent top cut dweller for the very final seasonal. Swiffer, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you on as well, bro. It should be a good episode. We're gonna talk about some stuff, some pretty hot button topics tonight. We got a full discussion list going, so let's get right into it. You guys obviously have been playing some of these daily rumbles. I know I have, but there's been a lot of things that could be adjusted. Does anybody want to share their thoughts on the daily rumbles, where they're at right now, how they feel about them, where they would like to see them go, any changes they would like to see?
Yeah, so I guess I'll go first. So my experience is actually kind of weird with daily rumbles. So my very first daily rumble was actually really good. My very first round was against Santa, TCG. And then my second to last round, or my last round, was against Sir Termint, who's like a seasonal champion finalist, right? So I was like, oh, these things are like real now. Like I had 3 opponents that were kind of just playing whatever. But my other 2 opponents were like top level players that I knew that played well. I cooked them anyways, just for the record. Um, but I was like, oh, it's like an actual like thing. And then every gauntlet I've played, or every rumble I've played since then, has just been like not a single top level player that I at least know of or could have been playing and been like, oh, that guy like played well. Like most of the time, it's still just meme decks and then just opponents playing cards.
Yeah, if I had to add on to that too, like I think the idea behind the rumbles is great. I like giving instead of like just having like the seasonal tournaments, right? We have another incentive for people to be a little bit more competitive about it if they can't make it up to that seasonal part. So they can play the rumbles and there's rewards for it. It's more of an incentive to play the game, but I do agree there should probably be more of a matchmaking to it, right? Because Mo had that run where it was there was a couple high level master players, right? And there's competition, then there's others and you just like ran through it. And then I know the few I've played, it was just a complete ran through. So I think for both ends, right, the game will be more enjoyable when both players are really going at it as opposed to just one person getting steamrolled and not having fun and one person steamrolling and kind of just like, okay.
Yeah, I very much agree. The one Rumble I played, I had a loss to, I forget who it was, but like a known Masters player in my second to last round. So I got 5-0. The rest of those were a wash. I thought my decks were horrible. It's just like I was able to win anyways, just because I was playing a bit better, because other people are also playing even worse decks. So it definitely didn't feel very skill testy. It's just kind of like, oh, I can have fun and play however I want, and it'll work out.
Y'all just haven't figured out the secret. Queue at 5 a.m. when your brain is fried, so that way every game is a challenge.
Yeah, I don't even mind the fact that it's like, oh, these things aren't challenging, because I feel like there's not much Riot can actually do about that. Because if you also think about like how many Masters players there are and how many top level players there are, like, oh, and it's also different for each person. Like if my gold friend who's learning the game wants, like, he's not going to want to play against just Masters players, and like, you know, some type of matchmaking, because they have it open all day, or not, they don't have it open all day, because they have it open for this like time frame that's like very wide. Like Monty was saying, oh, just play at 5 a.m. forehead, and then I can play at like 6 p.m. So because like this big thing, it's really hard to find a slot unless like all of the Masters of players are like top level players agree, like, okay, let's all just queue starting at the time of 7 p.m., then I don't really see there ever being a way. Because I also don't want to wait in queue for 12 minutes for them to find another Masters players to put me against.
There are some small things they can do that they currently aren't. They're not matching people's records.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So on my run, I ran into the same guy 2 games in a row and beat him twice. And that's got to feel horrible for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a small problem on Masters side as well, queuing to the same person. But at the very least, even if you aren't matching using like the ladder MMR, if you match by record, you're still going to get more competitive matches at the 5-win threshold.
Yeah,
I'm hoping.
Actually, agree
Go
with
ahead.
Phansora. I like that idea again because I think seasonals works like that too. You'd be matched against someone with the same record as you, so I think definitely that will go not only make it more competitive the farther you go in it, and help with that. it solves everything. Definitely, I think keeping it on.
And you, of course, can have the same like relaxation of like, oh, if it's 5 o'clock and it's only me and 2 other people queuing, then you'll figure it out. But it's too. I don't know if there's any restrictions at the moment.
Yeah, if there are, it is far too lenient, in my opinion. I definitely agree with the same record should be matched, right? It should be as close to a Swiss experience as possible, I think. And right now, it's just not. Like, I've queued into players who on their first game while I'm in my last, and that shouldn't happen. Not unless they have roughly close MMR, which I think there is an MMR to Gauntlet. I think there always has been. I'm just not sure how strict that matching is because, like we said, it'll match anybody with any record, and it's probably just too relaxed right now. I think there is something to be said about the fact that it's a beta season and they're trying to test all these systems, and they want to stress test it all, and they want to make sure that it is functional before they go around tweaking everything. And that's fine, but it's definitely important for us to give our feedback at this point in time and say what we, as competitive players, would like to see out of the system that's being designed to at least kind of support us. So that was
That's the main reason why I'm not worried, I was going to say, is because it's a beta season and they have another like month and a half moving forward. And given their recent track record, it seems likely that they'll like put this feedback into good use.
Mm-hmm. My other thing, which I know is already being addressed, is the time slot. It is West Coast friendly, and that's about it. OS gets screwed. East Coast is like, it's reasonable for East Coast, but more than half the time slot is after midnight, right? Like, I don't know. I don't want to be playing at 5 a.m. It's nice that I can because I've been busy with the last couple of weeks, and I've had to get my games in at like 2, 3, 4 a.m. But I don't want to be up that late. Like, it shouldn't be an option for me, I don't think, because it just encourages degeneracy for a lot of people. Yeah, but I know they're aware of that. I know they're already looking at it. And then the other thing, the length of the gauntlets overall. I think it's just a little bit too long. But that's another thing that's on their radar.
Yeah, that's definitely my that's my only real complaint. If they were like, oh, put in a feedback slip right here, it would most certainly be the length, because right now the length is played as 6 wins or played at 3 losses, and that's literally an open, right? Like, assuming that you get 2 buys, like if you play enough gauntlets to get your 2 buys in an open, opens are played at 6 wins or 3 losses. So they're actually asking us to play a full ass open every single day, which is like kind of ridiculous. But I mean, I know that's not what they intended. They already said like, oh, we didn't mean for it to be 6 win best of 3s. And this is also just the best of 3 gauntlets. I think the best of 1 is fine. And they also clearly said, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen. This isn't going to happen. And we have a fix in play. And they even asked us like, which of these fixes would you prefer? Because we have like many fixes we can do. So that's why I haven't really complained about Gauntlet too much. It is fairly easy to get your buys and stuff, but also like ladder was fairly easy. It was just that ladder and this probably took around the same amount of time. The only difference is like with ladder, you can shove all of your time across like a month when you wanted to, because people didn't realize it, but you'd sit there and play ladder for like 10-12 hours a day. And all that is like 2 gauntlets spread apart, or like 3 gauntlets spread apart. So it's just like forcing you to actually play every single day to get your buys, whereas ladder could have let you just like high roll one day or something.
Actually, thinking on it a little bit more, my one real complaint, I don't like closed deck list for the gauntlet experience. And they've said the first Runeterra Open is going to be closed deck list as well. They don't intend for the opens to be deck list going forward, but I'm pretty sure
like the actual open or like this one,
like the beta.
Yeah, the tech isn't ready. Like the one that's coming up.
Okay, yeah, but not the first like real.
No, not the first real one. The first one, the beta,
the
one that's starting. I'm pretty sure I saw Ruben tweet that the tech wasn't ready in time. They weren't able to get it out. Do
they intend to have that be the standard?
No, that's what was my understanding. I can go double check that on Twitter right now, but I'm pretty sure what I remember. They said this is how it's going to be for the first one. Going forward, we're planning to make it open deck list, but unfortunately, we weren't able to get the tech. And I'll just know.
Oh, that's what I meant. That open deck list was intended to be the standard.
Yes, we currently have another standard. Okay, no, that's the wrong tweet. Maybe. But
yeah, I think like I'm really excited and nervous to see how this gauntlet runs. Like, I don't really care about closed deck lists that much. Like, I'm the type of person that understands we're in a beta, and like if things aren't working perfectly, but they've acknowledged it, then I'm not going to complain about it, because they've already acknowledged it. Like they already know they're going to change this thing or this thing is wrong, and they have plans for it. But the one thing I am nervous about is what we've already said about gauntlets is the matchmaking and how that plays into the open. Because from my understanding, is the open is basically just gauntlet, but in open. Right? Where
Right,
it's like
you can,
play it, you just like queue up at your own time and just like queue game.
If you queue up immediately and play a bunch of fast decks, then you're like likely to be getting all the new players who are trickling in throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean,
and then if you start later, then you're more likely to be queuing in like to the end people.
Yeah, it's just like I don't even know if that necessarily matters. Like you're hitting the people just starting, or you're hitting the people that are like still playing because they're 5 wins. As much as it's like the quality of player, because it's already open to not top 700 masters, and like top 700 masters already wasn't the like highest of quality. So like you put that together with the amount of players from the open, with the like no same score matchmaking, it's like, am I gonna be 5-0 playing against an 0-2 silver player or something? You know, like how are they doing this matchmaking thing? And that's the thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah, so I found the tweet. It wasn't actually from Ruben. It was from the Lore Report, who is Marshall, who is Sunny's editor. He's been running this account. It used to be the LOR parody account. And it says, the Runeterra Open this week will be a closed decklist tournament. You won't see the cards your opponent has in their deck before banning, similar to current daily rumbles. Ryze is aware of the closed decklist and will aim to fix for future opens. Source Rubens. So, it is going to be closed decklist this weekend. But just like Mo, I get it. It's beta season. This is for where the kinks are going to be worked out. And without the beta season, we would just be launched straight into this. So I'm okay with this not mattering. I'm okay with this being a little janky. It's just the nature of adding a new feature, right? And something I wanted to touch on that you mentioned earlier, the trophies being too easy. Again, that's also part of the beta season's experiment, right? If they determine that it is too easy to get your 2 buys, they can always extend that rewards track, add something in before, or just make it so that way you need more points to get to that first or second buy.
Well, so they can't actually do that, right?
They can.
They can, but you still have a limit because, like, unless they just don't want you to have 2 buys until the 3rd open or something, then there's a very clear limit.
They can move it down the track as well, right? I get what you're saying. There's only so many points that you can get.
There's only so many points you can get before the first open, and there's only so many. Like, this open, how it worked out because of the, like, delayed launch thing because of the hack on Riot headquarters, like, there's actually just barely enough days for you to get 1 buy before tomorrow. If you would have 6-0'd every gauntlet but 1, and then you just had to, like, participate in that last one, you can actually get a buy. But, like you said, they can't like actually like change that too much, right? If they want it to be that quick for the other one, because it's like, oh, people are getting buys. It's not that people are getting buys too easily because like, oh, you're getting too many points. I think it's more that just the quality of players. Because like if you move the buys back to where like, oh, you have to play every single day and then 6-0 to get 2 buys, like that's also just like miserable.
Yeah,
like, I don't think they expect players to play perfectly to get their 2 buys, so there is still a limit on how far back they could push it, assuming they want you to have your buys before X tournament. Like, maybe they don't want you to have both buys before the first one. That's fine. I would assume by the big Worlds qualifying, like, major open, they would want you to have both buys. And then, so, like, in that regards, they can only set back how many points you get so much before it turns into you have to play and 6 wins every single gauntlet, which I think is kind of unreasonable.
There's a few other options. They could change the structure so it's like, you know, top X rumbles per week.
Yeah.
So that way, you still have the thing where you need to, like, instead of just like shifting the scale, you just basically limit the maximum per week that you can get, just by saying, oh, you get, if you 6-0 3 times, then you get max points for the week.
Yeah, that makes sense. They could also shift the point structure from the rumbles to be like 5 and 6 gives you the same amount of points, or like very similar, but 1 through 4 or 1 through 3 gives you fewer than what it currently gives. So that way it is weighted slightly more top heavy, but it's more rewarding at the top half than what it currently is. That way it's still skill testing, and you still have to, quote unquote, skill testing. And you still have to make it to that end. But yeah,
Right, but that's like the thing, right? Is like all of these solutions don't actually tackle the like issue that Riot could have or that the players could have. It's like if the issue is players are getting trophies too easily, that means that the gauntlets themselves are just too easy. So it doesn't matter how many you make me play, I'm going to 6-win all of them. It's just, do you want to make me play 20 before the open, or do you want me to just play, you know, like 3 a week for the open? Like, it doesn't actually matter how many you make me play. If I'm just going to 6-0 all of them and have like a brain rot afterwards, it doesn't actually change how easy it is people get trophies. All you're doing is just changing the like numerical value of what a trophy is, which doesn't actually change anything.
Yeah, but solving that core issue is a lot harder, right?
Yeah,
it's to implement a hard MMR, or maybe just restricting the matchmaking and making it stricter so people more often try to match with somebody at the same win record, like we talked about. Maybe that's just enough, but we won't know until we see that put in place, right? Yeah. But I think that's enough chat about the Rumbles. The next thing I wanted to talk about today was the wide meta versus imbalanced meta debate that's kind of been ongoing the last couple weeks. We have, and including even last season, the last 2 patches basically have been some of the most wide open, most low power, most well balanced meta games, I will say, out of any period of lore history. I personally have been a reasonable fan of them. I don't necessarily dislike the metas where one singular deck rules the game, but I'm a fan of letting everything have its time in the sun and letting everything be able to play a little bit. I know a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are very frustrated with the current experience. It does kind of make building a tournament lineup a little bit more awkward sometimes. Mo, why don't you kick us off on this one as well?
Yeah, so I think wide open metas are absolutely horrible and should never exist if you have to play ladder as much as they previously forced us to play ladder. Because nothing is worse than just like at that point, ladder's just a slot machine, right? Because it's just hoping you get good matchups. If there are legitimately 4 to 6 really good viable decks that all have their like triangle, like star shaped, you know, pattern of like, oh, this beats this, loses to this, and then beats this, and then loses to this, and it's like very balanced, that doesn't matter if out of the 10 games I hit like, you know, I low rolling hit 7 bad matchups. It's like, well, I'm still like favored into half the field, but if you don't hit that half, then it doesn't matter. And it sucks. But I think having an open meta and balanced meta is perfectly fine for tournaments where you're best of 3. Most of the time it's more open than people think anyways, because you have more options. Just like, oh, I'm hitting like a really, really bad thing. Let me, you know, ban that and then make your other 2 matchups 50-50. And I also think it's fine, like I said, if you don't just have to play one deck, best of 1 closed deck list, you know, hundreds of games per season. That's my opinion. Just like in tournaments, it's perfectly fine. If you're playing in some cringe lore that's like, oh, I'm like 9x of the same deck, so I'm just gonna like hard target you anyways, that sucks, but that's also a risk they're willing to take, so the odds of them going like 0-2 is gonna be fairly high. So I think open, like the direct answer is, do I like open or do I think open metas are better or not? I think it's really, really good for anything not forcing you to play one deck best of 1 a whole bunch.
I think Mo put it in really good words, right? Like, even we've all experienced where like there's a ton of good decks, or like anything can really be good, right? So we're like, okay, I'm gonna play this deck because I like it, and then you queue into the 4 counter matchups. You're like, okay, so I'll play this deck, and then you queue into the other deck's 4 counter matchups. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to the first one, and then the next game after it's another counter. It's like, what do you want me to do? That like feeling of I'm like switching decks and trying to adopt, and nothing's happening. As opposed to like, okay, so I know these 3 decks are good. I can master this one and then figure out how to pilot the other matchups. And so this is where it kind of gets iffy, right? With the open, you can say, okay, I'm going to pick this one deck and get really good at it, right? Understand all these matchups, understand how to pilot it, how to play it, and climb through there. However, you do run that risk of it's kind of random because everything's good. The odds of running into anything is pretty equal. Or if we take, let's look like Aatrox Vayne, right? The 2 big decks, it was Sarah Bar and Aatrox Vayne. And those dominated. And so you would run into that a lot. So I played Aatrox and I was like, okay, how do I win this matchup? How do I win the mirror? And then it was more consistent. And you there was more I guess, skill. You could express skill more, understanding how to pilot these matchups and run through it and climb ladder like that. And like I've said, I think it is definitely a nightmare when it is open and it just doesn't feel like you can really do much as far as picking a deck and climbing.
I kind of have mixed feelings about it. Like, on the one hand, it's kind of fun to be able to play almost any deck and have it be at least decent. But yeah, as they've said already, I do think it still affects tournament scene, certainly to a lesser extent than open ladder, but it kind of devalues being able to read the meta as a skill, and being able to like predict what you think the average person is going to bring and then try to counter it. When it's just wide open, you just kind of want to bring the 3 best decks, and that's usually a general good advice, but especially when you can't even try to counter a specific pocket because it's only going to be showing up like 1 round out of however many you're playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like the thing with that though. That's kind of just like every open ever, because like the thing with opens that are funny and like seasonals I call opens, is because you're playing like people always have this idea of like, oh, these are the best decks. You will hit this deck, 9 times out of 9 rounds. So you should play these like tier 3 decks to counter these. Even like Seraphine Bar. You're like, oh, I have the 3 best decks that have a 42% win rate at best on ladder. But trust me, guys, they beat Seraphine Bar. And then your first round is some like Gauntlet player that brought triple aggro because they're in Gauntlet silver player and thought it was fun. And you lose. So it's like, to me, the best strategy is always just kind of like bring, if not the 3 best decks, just 3 like really, really good decks. And it's not even because like, oh, I don't want to try and read the meta. It's that these decks are just so good, they're going to beat most of the meta anyways. That's like, it doesn't really matter what you bring, unless you're like randomly hard targeting this like specific deck and you make it past like round 1, then like, I'm probably chilling. But also just as a player, EV-wise and time-wise, having what Swiffer put it like very good words is like, oh, if there's only 3 good decks or like really good decks, you just like pick 1 or 2 of them and master them inside the different matchups. That's so much more time EV for a player side than having to sit here and be like, okay, I'm gonna spam Aatrox Vayne for a week straight, learn all the matchups, play it really well, blah blah blah. Or it's like, okay, I'm gonna learn Aatrox Vayne into this, and I'm gonna learn like this other deck, and I have to learn this other deck, and I have to learn this other deck. It's like having to try and learn all 8 of the like 8 really good decks. You have to learn like more than just 1, right? Because there's probably some like super huge triangle of rock paper scissors between those 8 decks, like what we have right now. So you have to pick 2 to 3 of those, and now you have to like get super familiar between, instead of having to master 8 matchups on 1 deck, you have to master 8 plus matchups on like 2 or 3 decks. And it just significantly takes up way more time and way more testing than just like most people have to try and do that.
I'm just having flashbacks to the Ari Kennen season when we brought double aggro plus Ari Kennen, and then neither one of us queued into Ari Kennen or Pantheon, which it was also really good into. We both missed every matchup of the 2 top, the 2 top metagame pillars. And that was actually a good lineup for that season, I thought. We just kind of lower rolled a little bit.
It was would have won Top Cut. Looking at Top Cut, we would have dominated because everybody brought it. But yeah, in opens, and that was the last time I brought not 3 like top tier decks. And ever since then, I've gotten like, I missed Top Cut on once because I was bad, and then went top 32, top 8. So like, just play good decks, man.
So I'm not saying don't bring good decks, because you're going to run into the top deck 3 times maybe over 9 rounds,
give or take,
maybe
roughly speaking.
Yeah,
averaging around 3, sometimes 0, sometimes 5. It doesn't matter. But the point is, when you can have somewhat of a read, you can skew your decks to counter the like better decks, which the better players will be playing in the later rounds. Mm-hmm. And you'll get slightly more points just because you have a slight edge on that. So you're not playing like, level 9 decks. You're playing like level 1 decks to beat the level 0 decks.
Yeah, it's just a giant thing of like, do you want to plan to go 5-0 and then like hopefully get a win the last like 2 rounds and then qualify? Or are you hoping to like skill diff / like roll decent matchups the first 5 rounds and then have a really good matchup into the top player lineups and then guarantee win those last 2 rounds to Top Cut? It's like, which half are you trying to put your points into?
I think both of those are reasonable strategies in like the past seasons, or like when you have a super wide open meta, trying to just skill diff all these weird matchups and then try to get to the point where you'll be able to play the good player. That's kind of just thrown out the window when you're playing against who knows what.
Triple aggro, baby. Consistency.
See, like if we saw,
yeah,
and like when it comes to prepping, because I know a lot of people will prep for these tournaments, right? How are you supposed to prep for matchups when you have no idea what's going to be brought?
Yeah.
That like there's almost no point in prepping at that point, because like why would I scrim X into Y and then never see it because we had a hunch that maybe people were going to bring it? When there's 3 good decks that are out there, and now we can say, okay, what's this matchup like? What's that matchup like? Can I actually bring this? What other decks can I bring, right? You have more of an idea, and then you get to practicing, you get to scrim it and do all these things. But when you can't really tell what's going to be brought, you aren't incentivized to want to go test and want to go scrim. It's like, what's the point? I just play it on ladder and practice like that instead, which even then isn't good quality practice. You want to be scrimming. You want to be doing those best of threes and practicing like
it's
that.
just like exhausting, and it incentivizes spending way too much time just trying to scrim everything to be on top.
Yeah.
So just kind of as a side question, mostly because I was reading Drizoff's tweet with his article the other day, and if you haven't read it, he talks in the tweet about whether or not meta should be balanced like this and what the point of balancing is, and kind of his conclusion at the end of the article was that metas shouldn't necessarily be balanced. 50% win rates across the board shouldn't necessarily be the goal. Balancing's goal should be to make the game fun. Do you guys think the game is fun right now? Because I do.
Yes. No, I do think the game is fun. I think like from a like high level tournament standpoint is where it's like it's a little frustrating how wide open it is, but playing the game has been pretty fun. You can just pick up any deck, and there's some version of the deck that's good, and that's fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of like the opposite, but I'm also kind of like an I hate ladder type of person. Like with my whole fucking chest, I hate ladder. And I've also come back from like a very long break. I took a break essentially right after I didn't qualify for World's Top 16. I just stopped playing LOR. So I've been gone for about, what is that, like 3 months now, almost 4. And so I participated in my first grassroots tournament last weekend in like over a year probably since I participated in a grassroots tournament. And it was very fun. And I really like, I have a team and a group that I'm like prepping with. And prepping for these tournament metas and for stuff like that, it is kind of open. And we've decided like, oh, there's like, what do we have? We have like Elite, Tristana, SI, Tristana Noxus, 9X Broadmane, Ryze, FTR. Like, yeah, I think we listed out like 13 decks or something like that. And being able to sit there and just be like, oh, this, we can play this deck that like we legitimately enjoy, but is also good. You can like just play it against random players and win, and like winning is fun. So it's like very much fun there. But being able to like really test yourselves and knowing, oh, do you know this matchup and can you play against these top players in the tournament meta? Like, while there are a lot of the samey matchups, even the mirror match is with these decks, which I can't believe I'm ever saying this because I've always been a huge I hate mirror matches. They take 0 skill player also because they do. But with the Nora mirror match and like the Nora Broadmane mirror match, I like really enjoy these Broadway mirror matches. I still don't think they take like nearly as much skill as regular matchups because mirror matches can only take so much skill. But it's really cool to see like how can you kind of take every advantage out from these like random cards you generate. And it's like, oh, my opponent generated a better card than me. That sucks, but like, what can I actually do about that? And that to me is pretty fun.
You should try playing Ryze mirror matches. Those are the most miserable things in the world.
Ryze. We literally have not scrimmed against Ryze a single time because we're just going to ban it. So like we literally have just like never scrimmed the Ryze matchup ever with any deck that we've considered playing. It's just not worth it.
Well, that's kind of a perfect segue into our next topic. I was going to bring us on to Broadmane, but we'll just skip that and come back to it a little bit because I do want to talk about Ryze. I hate Ryze. I'm going to put that on the table. I have like a 20-minute, I have a 40-minute rant video about what I think about Runeterra champions and how they've evolved over the years. It's in 2 parts. There's 2 videos. And in the second video, it's also like a 30-minute video. And at least 15 minutes is spent talking about why Ryze should not receive a buff and why Ryze is cool from a design perspective because he gives a Runeterra champion that's like focused around a region and how toxic he would be if he was ever actually a good champion. And lo and behold, we've run into Ryze meta. Ryze is a good champion. The way it's shifted, he's so frustrating to play against. He's everything that's bad about Legends of Runeterra, in my opinion. And I will fully say that, and I will back that with my whole heart. I think Ionia Control has a place in a metagame, and I think Ionia Control can be frustrating, but usually it has more ways you can mess with it. Like, it is very frustrating when your opponent can just constantly hold cards and not have to do anything and just answer your points turn after turn after turn after turn. But Ryze and his runes exemplify it. Like, they take that idea and they push it to like a whole new level. And if you remove a Ryze rune, great. Like, you just spent a whole bunch of mana doing nothing because they're getting these for free basically at this point. counters Teemo, which like it's really funny if you use the. I generated the plant 3 choose a spell. I forget what it's called.
Mhm.
That's really funny when you generate.
Entrapment.
Entrapment.
Yeah,
or something
entrapment.
like that.
Entrapment.
Yeah, that card is really funny when you generate it against a Ryze because you'll put like I flipped my Teemo with a single card. It was hilarious, but the Teemo never gets to attack it, so you can't double the shrooms. And like because he continuously adds more cards to the deck, he's never actually drawing into these shrooms. So like, how do you beat Ryze? Go wide aggro, okay, but then Claws of the Dragon comes out, Eye of the Dragon stalls out.
They
Stuns
still like
happen.
deal 2 every turn to something, so it's like very frustrating. Yeah,
I just hate Ryze. I don't think this is a healthy place for the game in that aspect. That's the one deck I have a real problem with, and I think a lot of people said Ryze should not be buffed even beforehand. So I was surprised to see him get a buff. How do you guys feel about Ryze? Swiffer, do you want to kick us off this time?
So here's what I do. I haven't played against too much Ryze, and I actually was playing a little Ryze earlier. And I think part of the issue, if you want to talk about scaling down fun, right? You're interacting with your opponent, you're playing cards, you're doing things. The problem with Ryze is just going to slam the pass button until they can safely play their landmarks, and then you're going to try to do everything you can to win, and they're just going to like keep reacting. And it's like you literally sit there, you're like, there's nothing I can do. They're going to win the game, and this is it. And it's boring because it just feels like you can't do anything against the deck. That's why that's not fun. And how do I see it? Even playing it, I'm like, I'm just passing until I can play my eye, and then I go refill my spell mana with the runes. Then I find more runes. Then, oh look, here's Ryze. It has spell shield. Good luck killing it. You killed it. Here's entreat. Here's another one. Oh, and deny and homecoming. All these different things. It just doesn't feel like you can do anything, and that is not a fun feeling at all.
Yeah, I think Monty kind of touched on it, but I think the overarching issue with Ryze is that there's just it's not like previous decks we've had like this, whereas you could just always interact with them. You just can't. Like, you deadass just cannot interact with Ryze. Like, also what Swiffer said, like, not even just like, oh, you killed my Ryze, here's an entreat. I've never killed a Ryze. I have been playing nothing but Broadmane decks, which is like Disintegrate and Broadmane's in play. I play plenty of removal spells, and I have literally never killed a Ryze. Ever. Because they just wait until he has spell shield. I have to pre-commit 2 to 3 spells, and they just go homecoming. Or they go 3 mana recall my Ryze. And it's just like, yeah, like, deny. And I'm just like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, well, the next turn, here's another 3 cards to try and kill your Ryze. And they just go homecoming. I just like recall my unit. It's like, here's my 1 spell to like to save my champion and protect him from your 2 to 3 spells. And it is just, there is just nothing you can do about it, because eventually they do that, twice. Oh, they used up 2 to 3 cards. Meanwhile, I had to use up 6 cards minimum at that point to pop the spell shield and try and kill something. And it is just not, you just cannot keep up with those trades. And eventually they just go play Ryze on your turn, open attack you, and you're just like, yeah, I mean, like, as I lose, like, all the other ones, Lee Sin, you can interact with the Lee Sin, you can interact with your unit. What are the other like elusive, like Ari Kinnan or other elusive style decks? It's like you can play Challenger, Sharpsight, at least attempt to like try to kill the units or kill some amount of units or race them back because they're not on this infinite stall game plan of like infinite mana. Any other Ionia deck, usually you just tax their mana, or you can just pass into them and then do an OTK swing where they only have like 9 mana, so they can only play 3 cards instead of being like, oh, I'm attacking into you every turn. And then they go, okay, here's a card this turn, and a card that turn, and 2 cards this turn because we're late in the game. It's like you can just find ways to actually play around good Ionia decks. But Ryze, you just cannot, because they essentially have infinite mana because of the runes. And then even with that mana, if they don't have that one, it's like, well, the Rune Prison one, it reduces the cost of it for some reason. So they have like a 0 mana Steel Tempest for some reason. And it's like, oh, now they also have burst speed attackers or burst speed blockers that I have to think about. So it's like, well, is this open attack lethal? Do I need to develop? It's like, oh, if I develop, they could do like this, activate these runes, do this thing. So open attack pushes the most damage. And then they go, oh, just kidding. Like, punish you by burst speeding out 2 blockers. It's just like, there is no winning against this Ryze deck. Like, they just have literal answers to everything, and you cannot do anything about it.
So I feel like I'm the only one who at least enjoys Ryze a little bit.
I enjoy playing Ryze because I enjoy winning. Like, I'm bringing Ryze to this tournament. I'm either on 9x Broadmane or I'm on 6x Broadmane and Ryze because, like, it's Ryze. Like, if ladder mattered right now, I would just be playing Ryze. I would just play Ryze, get to, like, 1,000 OP, get my 7-2 seeding, and call it a day before they nerf Ryze before the seasonal. Like, I would...
Do you guys think Ryze is a strong deck?
A little bit, yeah.
I think it's well-positioned in the meta.
I play Fearsomes.
I think there's a difference there. I think being positioned well and being strong are two different things. I think Ryze is very, very well positioned.
Well, I'll agree that Ryze is too strong. I don't think it's too strong for the meta. I think it's too strong for a Ryze deck to ever be.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like, this is the type of deck I like. I like playing Infinite, I like Ryze. Uninteractive combos are right up my alley. I personally really did not like the buff they gave Ryze because it made games really swingy off of whatever your first rune was. If you got the Spell Mana rune, you are so much more favored to win than if you got, like... it depends on the matchup, whether you got, like, the deal 2 against aggro or the stun against, you know, a bit more mid-rangey Horn decks, let's say. But the fact that the Spell Mana rune just enabled almost everything else, if you got it or didn't off of your first 1, maybe 2 runes, depending on the deck, you're like almost winning or losing the game from that point.
Yeah.
And that didn't really feel fun. That's something that, like, for both of us was entirely out of both players' controls. I do generally like, I think the beginning part of, like, Ryze games are interesting to play with. I actually think Claws of the Dragon is a cool card that's, like, finally taking its time to shine in this deck. But, like, the late game where it's just like, 3 runes down, Ryze has Spell Shield, and then I also have, like, you know, Steel Tempest, 0 cost Steel Tempest, and then also 2 other recalls. I think from that tipping point, at, like, 3 to 4 runes, I think that's just like, I'm just going through the motions, and I guess I win.
Yeah.
But the beginning of the game where you're trying to set up, I think that's actually a really interesting part of the game, where you can try to tax Ryze opponents. Because
assuming they
even
didn't
though
open
like claws...
the mana rune.
Yeah, we're ignoring the mana rune existing. But there's stuff like, you know, open attacking. Most Ryze decks aren't playing Concussive Palm, so you actually kind of want to develop because most of their punishes are either 4 mana or like Steel Tempest, so it has to be attacking. So there's slightly different ways you play around it compared to, like, other Ionia decks. But I do think, so it is too strong, but I think the early parts of the game are an interesting way to play as Ionia.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's slightly different than just the old Eye of the Dragon, that's it.
Yeah, the thing that, like, really kind of irks me, that I really feel like I hate it, because I was this type of player in MTG, or exactly what you described in Magic the Gathering, was I would play, like, these combo decks that essentially, like, won the game by turn 3, or, like, turn 4. And all the early games were always, like, kind of interesting, because it's, like, I played a lot of, like, KCI, which is essentially just spending the first 3 turns kind of, like, building mana, drawing cards, trying not to die. But then, like, you would essentially just get this hand where you have your engine to, like, win the game. So you have your Ryze, and then you have your essentially, like, infinite mana, and you just, like, show your opponent your hand because you've hit that point, and you just, like, in paper you would just say, like, can we just go to the next game? But in LOR you can't. So it's like, I've hit my Ryze, it has Spell Shield, I have my, you know, like you said, stun, save Ryze. Like, you literally cannot beat me, can we go to the next game? And LOR just, like, doesn't let you do that. And it just makes it even more tilting that I have to sit here and watch my opponent go through the motions, especially if it's, like, a not good opponent, because you have to sit there and watch them stumble and then watch them just prolong the game way longer than it needs to be. And I feel like I'm just wasting so much of my time at this point.
Yeah, we've talked about the wish there was a show hand button sometimes.
Yeah.
In the past. Definitely an issue. I just, like, I don't think Ryze should exist in this state. I think Ryze should have been and should continue to be relegated to a region. I think his design from a region perspective is, like, really interesting, actually. And I think it's great that the runes themselves are strong individually and, like, have merit. He should just never actually be allowed to have all 5 on the board, because a deck shouldn't be able to win without any units on the board in a unit-based game, right? Like, it's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But another card that's frustrating to a lot of players, and there's a lot of discourse about this one, is Broadmane. We talked about it a little bit already. 9x Broadmane lineups were kind of the hot thing for last week's tournament. There was something like 220 copies of
There's
Flock.
29 copies of Broadmane in top 8.
Yeah.
Which means each player, on average, had a Broadmane deck. Yeah. Which isn't true. Like, every player didn't have a Broadmane deck. So, yeah, it's like, depending on how you want to look at the stats, that's kind of ridiculous.
I think Broadmane's overrated.
I think Broadmane's cool.
How many games have you played
cool,
of Nora Broadmane?
Not that many.
I've played a few, and it frustrated me how it didn't have a win con. And I know there's a picture of Drizzle saying 3 damage. That's how much attack Broadmane has. There's your win con. Yeah. Like, come on.
But how many is a bit? Like 10?
I played about 20.
20?
5 to 10, I'd say.
5 to 10? Okay. I started this thing on Twitter when people like start giving super in-depth like comments. I asked them just how many games they played, and the amount of people that have between 0 to 10 games will like fucking astound you. Where they're like, well, Broadmane actually... No, I'm not saying like you're this way, Phansora, because you didn't say all of this, but there were people on Twitter that were like, well, Broadmane has like this issue and this issue and this issue, and he's actually only like a 6-mana Disintegrate, and this card like absolutely sucks ass. And I'm like, how many games have you actually played with Broadmane? And they're like, I actually haven't played. This is just going off my experiences from playing against it on ladder. And I'm like, okay.
No, so here's my stand. This is mostly like, because I know there's also a lot of people who I think are complaining about how often he shows up. And there's certain decks where he's very annoying against. Yeah. And the thing is, like, it's still the same Noxus problem, where Noxus control is everything's a 2-for-1. You're playing 2 cards to do one thing. And even with Broadmane on the field, even though you can, like, you know, Caustic Rift, make it rain to like get some really efficient ways to do it, you're still like going very card negative on all your kills.
For sure.
And so like that's a big limiter for why he's not like broken beyond belief. Like he's a decent card, but the fact like he himself does not win you the game. It's that he allows you to survive. So if you're playing Nora Broadmane, which is like the least win con Broadmane deck there is. Yeah. It's because you're winning through Nora portals.
Yeah.
And you just get like so much chip damage. And then Broadmane allows you to like deal with things mana efficient, but not card efficient.
Do you know how many games I brought my opponent to like 4 or 5 HP before turn 6 even, just because of Nora portals?
Yeah.
Like, the no win con thing is kind of a meme, right? Like you have a win con. It's Nora portals. Also, I'm playing Tibulk in my list. I run 2 copies of Raging Blade.
Yeah.
And
that's a much stronger win con.
Well, you know how many times I've ended the game with a ping? I haven't. It's Nora beatdown, and there's nothing wrong. Like that's a win condition. I don't know. People.
Oh yeah.
And attrition is also a win condition. That's the other thing people don't really understand. They don't think that running your opponent out of threats is a real way to end the game. That is a real way to end the game. What are you going to do if you have nothing?
It's a real way to end the game because you also have a bunch of little portals to put on the little chip pressure.
Yeah. But even if
I think the thing that a lot of people miss out is Broadmane allows you to do that a lot of times. Like if I'm playing against Plunder and my opponent has like, you know, they did their early game stuff and I just have infinite blockers from Nora, or I just like remove it somehow with like not Nora in the PNT version, and then it gets to that turn 5, 6, 7 where my opponent's just about to go like Gangplank, Sejuani, and stuff like that. Broadmane allows you to have more efficient removal than Noxus would normally have, and allows you to survive through all of their real threats to the point to where you could attack for just 3 damage at a time and then be like, yeah, anything you play from this point is just simply going to die to either one of my little shitter units, a, you know, ping spell if I need it to, or like I'm just not going to attack you and sit here and pass until I eventually draw into my burn or draw into my portals or draw into something that kills you. And the reason I can do that is because I have this Broadmane in play that says anytime you play an actual threat, it is just instantly removed before you have a chance to do anything. And Noxus doesn't have, or didn't have that before without Broadmane. You would have to have like, you know, 6 copies of Disintegrate, which you just like literally cannot play. And Broadmane just allows you to play 6 to 9 copies of Disintegrate, because once you have them in play, it's like, oh, all of your Mystic Shots disintegrates, Blade's Edge disintegrates, Caustic Rift disintegrates. Like everything is a disintegrate now, so you can answer anything at any point in time after turn 6. That is something that Noxus couldn't do. So even though you're like 2-for-1ing yourselves, it's not the like really bad 2-for-1ing yourselves, but also every one of these decks have like 9 to 11 points of card draw, which is like literally a quarter of your deck. The worst one being Bilgewater, which is also why I think like a lot of the 9x Noxus players are off of the Bilgewater version. But the PNZ version plays a boatload of draw. It plays your like Aloof Travelers. It plays the draw 2, make 2, like
Drum
reduce
solo.
cost by 2. Yeah, drum solo,
Drum solo.
and then it plays some amount of Static Shock. And so like that right there draws you a bunch of cards on top of drum solo drawing you 2 cards.
Tellstones. They run
and they played
too.
2 copies of Tellstone. So it's like this deck has a lot of draw, and then the Bandle City version obviously plays a lot of draws because you have Pokestick Generator Gnar, you have Portal Palooza in the deck, you have we play the 4-mana draw 2 card, like 1 copy of that. So the decks play enough draw now to get rid of the Noxus 2-for-1 yourselves. The issue isn't that you have to 2-for-1 yourselves and you run out of cards. It was that you needed very specific cards to 2-for-1 at a certain stage in the game. And that is just not a thing anymore once you play a Broadmane.
Sure.
I think it's cool that Noxus has access to a way to expedite that and to remove that flaw. There is maybe something to be said about Broadmane having a few too many stats these days, because he was buffed previously. He started as a 2-4, I think, on release. And maybe a 3-5 is a little bit too big for such a powerful payoff. I don't know. I don't think it's that much of a problem, personally. I don't think the card is particularly frustrating to play into, given I'm playing Go Wide Aggro, because that's kind of how the meta's adapted to adjust to this Nox control stuff. So maybe that's just my own experience and bias coming in. Whether they have 1 or 2 ping spells, it doesn't really matter. They're firing them off the same way at my units.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of...
I will say that my experience is mostly from playing the Bandle.
Yes, which
Broadmane
is by
deck.
far the strongest version, in my opinion.
You think so? I've heard that the PNZ
Is the strongest that
Yeah.
strongest deck or the strongest deck that Broadmane is like the
It's
strongest
definitely
Broadmane deck?
I think it's the strongest Broadmane deck for sure.
But is it because of Broadmane
No, it's
or
because of Nora.
like?
And that's actually what I was going to
Yeah.
say before Monty moved to the next point. But obviously, if you're going to say it, go ahead. Talk your shit.
No, I was just gonna say that like this was my impression that like this is what made me think that like I think that like I haven't played Caustic Griff decks, and sure, Caustic Griff with Broadmane that sounds insane.
Yes.
I just haven't played as or against that quite much.
That's what...
It's my experiences
Same thing.
from the Vandal one where the portal beatdown
Yeah.
was always such a bigger deal than Broadmane ever was.
Yeah, but the issue before, like, you couldn't play Sway Nora before, or people tried, right? But the deck was ass because you just like simply could not kill things, ran out of cards, and just like they killed your Nora, you lost the game. Because you didn't have efficient stall because you were over here drawing Leviathans and like Swains. And that's like not a thing you have to worry about anymore. Is that now if you draw your Broadmane, like you are just like winning the game because it's immediately killing something, and then if they don't remove it, they just can never play a real threat again. But I was also gonna say that I don't think Broadmane's like broken. Like Broadmane can easily like lose. Like there are decks that beat Broadmane decks. It's definitely not this. I feel like there's a lot of split between like, oh, Broadmane is a shit card or Broadmane is broken, and I don't think it's either. Like I think the card is very good and enables these Noxus control decks to be good again. Like when was the last time we had a good Noxus control deck? Like
Rising Tides?
Raven?
yeah, like
I think
Raven Bloom, like
original Raven Bloom.
Annie TF,
Yeah.
or like Annie Ezreal or some shit, like whatever it was.
Even then, it was sketchy.
Yeah, even then, I smoked those decks. Those decks were supposed to be good into Demacia mid-range, and you know what? I like beat and 2-0'd every single thing that seasonal with my Poppy Demacia deck was Raven Bloom, like Annie Cat, or sorry, Annie
Cat
TF, Cat TF, whatever it was, like whatever variant they were playing, like it was just getting smoked by everything. And so we haven't had a good Noxus deck in a while, and I think that's very cool. And I think that keeps a lot of things in check. It keeps a lot of these. If we didn't have this deck, Alawi would be like absurdly disgusting outside of Ryze, but Ryze is like not a thing. Outside of Ryze, like Alawi would be just absurdly crazy, and Jax Orin would be much more present and a lot stronger than I think people think. Like literally watching day one of the expansion, I don't know if you guys watch much Twitch streams, but like Alan was just going on a fucking tear with Jax Orin. It was just like destroying people for hours and hours and hours until people started countering it with this, like, you know, these flock decks, these Noxus decks. And that's actually what kind of stirred the pot with finding Broadmane, was I said, hey guys, I want to play this like triple flock lineup. Like, how can we do that? And then Micah was like, oh, I don't know, this Broadmane card looks like kind of good. Let me go mess around with it. Let me try and find the second best flock deck, is where we were at. or the third best flock deck. So he was trying out Broadmane, and then realized Broadmane was like really good at doing what it did. And without Broadmane in the meta, I feel like a lot more things would cause a lot more problems. Or not Broadmane, just like Noxus control in general.
Mhm.
But Broadmane allows
sure.
Noxus control to be a thing and keep things balanced.
I mean, off of this last balance patch, the amount that they've buffed like mid-range decks, so you're like Alawi and Jax are like the two big ones. The amount of stats that those decks can get right now are insane. There's just like between like Ryze recalls, I think it's the only Iona deck, and then like all the Noxus stuff. They just can't exist right now.
Yeah, which is like unfortunate if that's what you enjoy, but they kind of, and like Ryze again is like so obscure. The thing about Ryze in tournaments is kind of a tangent. Is it's so good, but its second and third decks are just never the same. Like they're not on the same tangent as it. They're not on the same like matchup spread often. So Ryze in tournaments is kind of just like, oh, you either like ban it or just hope to not play it, and that's kind of why.
But they are being played a lot.
Yeah, for sure, it's being played a lot. Yeah, Ryze is being played a lot. If you're talking about the Alawi and Jax decks, those decks are also being played quite a bit. It's just not having as much success because usually your lineups are like triple unfavored. It's very rarely like, oh, I'll just ban like the Ezreal Draven deck from 2020 and then beat your other two decks. It's like, no, I'm playing just like triple Ezreal Draven.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's a good thing that Noxus control does exist right now, even if it is countering a lot of these strategies. Jax Ornn is that deck, and just Ornn decks in general. I was playing Ornn Noxus on the first day of the expansion, and I had a great win rate with that. I was making LeBlanc pop off. It was the best Nox Freljord deck that I played in ages. Like, the fact that those decks aren't allowed to exist is probably not the worst thing in the world. The other thing that it's hitting on is Echo Jinx. Echo Jinx is still very good despite the nerfs to Jinx, but it has a really hard time existing in a Noxus control meta because you can run Rite of Negation in that deck. It's not like a complete grief, but you're only allowed one. And they have a way to answer your Echo on 4, so you got to delay Echo to either 5 or 6, depending on your token, and then you need to have that one Rite of Negation, and then if you whiff beyond that point, you're losing the game on site, basically. So I think we would see a lot more complaints about decks like Jax Ornn and Alawi and Echo Jinx than we have been seeing about these Broadmane decks. There's definitely been a lot of discourse around Broadmane, given what we just talked about. Is it good? Is it bad? And I definitely agree with Mo. I think it's probably a fine card. Maybe it's a little bit too big on the body, like I said, but I don't. Who cares? Like it's serving a purpose, and that purpose isn't necessarily too over the top, in my opinion. So I think with the meta where it's at overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I think that we would definitely have issues with Jax or Ornn or Ilaoi if Broadmane didn't exist, and maybe we can shift that way in the next patch. But for right now, I think we're in a good spot. Do we want to talk a little bit about Tristana?
Sure. I played a bit of Tristana SI, the Atrocity deck. It's a pretty decent, like, aggro-y mid-range beatdown deck. I haven't seen a whole lot of it so far. It seems to be kind of popular, though, or growing popular.
I played a 30-minute mirror match of that deck. I had 5 minions on the field.
Oh.
It was absurd. We both just benched our first Trist, and then we were sitting there and just slamming minions turn after turn after turn and just trading minions into each other so we could hopefully outro our second Trist for an OTK. Actually, Drizoth came in, I was streaming, and Drizoth comes in and he goes, "What is this? What is going on? People are talking to me about no-win conditions. This is no-win condition." And it was just like, I'm sitting there going, okay, I can't slam my Trist because they're going to Vengeance, so I have to just grow the Trist until the point I can outro with it. It was just absurd. I think the SI list is okay. I think Noxus Trist is probably the best Tristana list right now, though. And
really,
just going closer back to like old Bandle City Noxus aggro.
Yeah, sounds like you got some thoughts, Mo.
It's like modern Bandle.
Oh, because you have Revelers.
Yeah,
and you go super wide. I see.
Yeah, I actually thought like that deck was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I don't think the deck's bad because it plays Reveler Feast. I think Reveler's Feast is probably one of the most broken cards in the game. It's just like super underplayed. But I don't think the deck's bad just for like multitude of reasons. I just like the SI version more because of the access of cards you got. Like Quietus seems like a much better card than like Decimate, and Vengeance is a much better card than like, you know, anything that playing Noxus actually gives you. And then you can just play the same cards outside of that. You can just play a little bit more controlling, have more agency, which is kind of, you know, fake, but have more agency, have the same game plan. And my favorite thing about it is that it beats a lot of the like Broadmane decks have played well. And it's actually like the first mid-range deck that we've had in a long time that can like actually play as an aggro deck if it needs to, which is why I think we see it have such this absurd win rate of like 64% or something like that at one point. Because when good players play it and you understand your matchup and you understand how your deck functions, then you can switch up and say like, oh, I just need to play aggro, so like I'm just gonna find my Bandle Commando, my Grandfather Fae, and then just like hit you with 3/1 spell shield units. And like, what does control do against that?
So
they literally can't.
Here's my question to you then. Do you think that the SI Tristana list is beating the Broadmane control decks more than any other Bandle City SI list? Because this is kind of the debate we're having with my prep group right now. MTux is trying to tell us that there's no reason to play Tristana SI, and I'm going, well, there's kind of a reason. He goes, there's 3 other decks that do it better. So I said, okay, name those 3 decks. He goes FTR, he goes Ryze, and he goes Bandle City SI. So I took the piss at him. I was like, this man just said, no, it's Tristana SI. And then he said, but wait, Tristana SI. And he didn't like that.
No. There's like 4 different Bandle City SI decks.
I was being a shit disturber. I knew what he meant. He was talking about Nora Heimer or Nora Vagar.
Yeah, so I think like in the Nora mirror matches, the like Noxus, like the Broadmane decks, I think Nora Viger is okay, so I think FTR is like pretty good, assuming they have Shihu Wonders. If they don't have Shihu Wonders, that matchup is like pretty, I wouldn't say pretty favored. I'd probably say it's like 53 to 55% for Nora decks. If they have Shihu Wonders, the game's just like over. I did win.
That feels like the only thing.
Yeah, it's by far the only thing, because they have like, FTR, and you're like either stun it, kill both of the units because you're playing Broadmane at that point, or you just have like deny.
You can just like disintegrate ping.
Yeah, exactly. Like they go like, oh, field to rush you, and I'm like, I have this Broadmane in deck, like you know, like they both like. Did you guys know that with Broadmane in play, any like 1 point of damage just kills Tryndamere, like dead ass, just full on kills him.
Wait, not through tough.
Yes, if it's level 1 Tryndamere, if he's level 1 Tryndamere, like unleveled, and he's damaged, and you have a Broadmane in play, it also works with disintegrate. If you disintegrate to ping a level 1 Tryndamere, he just dies.
No,
Straight
it
up.
flips now.
Yeah, level 1. No. He flips.
No, it flips.
He flips and keeps the mark.
It'll flip and disintegrate.
Keeps the mark.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually
Sometimes
just
disintegrate. It used to do that. I was in this
I know
call
with
Swiffer a while ago.
with
I was
Broadmane,
balling.
it just kills him. Like
Yeah.
I just put out a tweet actually where it was a
What?
damaged Tryndamere in play, damaged level 1 Tryndamere. I hit him with a group shot and he died. All the way. He leveled up and then died. Like it just took him off of the board.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So like
Okay.
Field of Rush is just not a card against you. The deal 3 damage to everything is like whatever, because you're a portal deck, so you just like refill with your hand anyways, or refill with your portals anyways, and it's essentially just Shihu Wonders. And then sometimes you're a high roller like I am, and you roll Mountain Goat, and you just have gyms, and then you just end up gymming the 2 cards that matter in play, and they don't get Shihu Wondered, and you're happy. But I think like that matchup comes down to 1 card, so I'll play that one a lot. The Nora SI, it depends on the variant. I think Viego we smoke. It's like not even close. I'll money match anyone any amount of money of Nora Noxus into Nora Viego. Nora Darkness is much harder just because of the burn threat. Because we sit here and we dirtle back and forth, but then you guys eventually just like hit me with catalyzers or just like burn me out. And if I can't mill you, it can become a problem, but most of the time you win that matchup by like milling. But sometimes that can be very difficult. That one is very much more of just like a draw death mid range. Like if they open with more portals than you just lose.
And then like Ix Jolly Burn.
Yeah, and then like Excalibur. But even with that, you could play around it because you play like aloofs, but then you could also just don't have units. Like no cap, just don't play units and you're fine. Or like you see Excalibur's about to come down, like swing in to trade your board and then just hope that you don't get hit by like the second and third Ixtali type thing. There's a lot you can do to actually win that matchup, but that matchup is just like too draw dependent for my liking. And I don't. Ryze is like not an SI deck, but Ryze just beats like everything in the meta. That's not degenerate aggro. So I will give you that. But yeah, Tristana, like I actually think Tristana is not favored into the Nora Broadmane version because it just simply puts out like infinite blockers. But every other Broadmane deck, like Broadmane PNZ, Broadmane Bilgewater, and then Bilgewater Noxus, Tristana smokes because they just like cannot deal with 3/1 spell shield units. They just have to sacrifice their own units to block. And like spoiler alert, those decks do not play units. They just don't play enough blockers.
Yeah, the other big thing is minions plus equipment. If you just throw your equipment, both of those are recurring resources, right? And like the deck doesn't have to spend its mana doing anything else. It's just going to vengeance your one big threat, and you can just continue going minion equipment. If that's demanding 2 pieces of removal every single turn, you're getting somewhere, right?
Yeah, so we scrimmed this matchup a lot, me and Jordan, last night, and I think the final count was either 5-1 or 6-1 with Tristana Atro into PNZ Noxus, not the Nora version. The Nora version was like 0-2, and we just stopped testing it because we figured it was not, you just lose. But the Noxus PNZ variant was very, very good because when you break it down, the Tristana Atro deck fundamentally abuses everything that a Noxus PNZ control deck has going wrong. So, like, name off the 3 worst things about Noxus PNC control, and it's card advantage, because you have to 2-for-1 everything. It's the fact that you can't really stop any amount of leaking damage, and it's the fact that leaking damage is permanent, and you don't play any type of life gain. And what does this deck do? This deck has infinite units, so it deals with the fact that you have to 2-for-1 constantly, or constantly have these, like, units that you just don't have. Then it also goes so wide that it makes you leak damage that you can't recover, and then it's going to kill you out with burn damage because you've leaked a bunch of damage and don't play lifesteal, don't play healing, so it's going to either kill you with a bunch of impact, kill you with Teemo Shrooms, kill you with ping spells, or kill you with atrocity. And those, like, 3 big things about Tristana Atro, just, like, from a fundamental level, destroys all Noxus PNC decks, and that's why that matchup is just, like, so bad that I think a lot of people just miss out on from the other versions of SI control. It's like you can beat it, but there's still ways for the Noxus control deck to come back and win. With this deck, it's just like you are so good into it that it's very, very hard for them to ever win.
So you think that there's merit to bringing Tristana SI then? Because I'm kind of leaning towards it.
No, not at all. No. That deck gets cooked by Alawi. Absolutely cooked by Alawi.
Yeah.
Like it is insanely bad into Alawi.
Yeah,
and I assume your other 2 decks smoke Alawi and Jax Ornn, and that's like the reason you're playing your like lineup. And bringing a 3rd deck that just absolutely gets cooked by Alawi Pink is like just asking to lose for no reason.
Fair.
But if it wasn't for that one matchup, I'd be like, that's our lineup, right? It's just like 6 Broadmane, Tristana Atro, you call it a day.
Interesting.
But if you don't care about the Alawi matchup, then you just bring Tristana Atro, because that deck is insane. If you care about the Alawi matchup, then you just cannot bring that deck.
Okay. Well, do we want to talk a little bit about lineups before we wrap up? We are getting to just over an hour here, but with the seasonal coming up, we're kind of already encroaching into the Open. Sorry, the Open. Yes. I'm sure our viewers are curious to hear what our thoughts on lineups are. I'll kick us off. I'm personally going to go triple aggro this season. I can't be arsed to put time in to learn something else. I don't necessarily think triple aggro is the place to be. I'm pretty confident on Tristana Noxus. I think it's a good deck. I'm pretty confident on Pirates. I have some opinions about Pirates, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of the Battlecaster House Spider lists. I've been playing Coral Creatures, unironically. It's nuts. It's actually fucking nuts. All the hits are fantastic with the exception of 2. And even the Bloodbait has some niche applications. I mentioned it earlier. You can use the
Snapjaw.
The Snapjaw Swarm, thank you, Bo, to flip a 3 out of 4 MF, which is really fucking funny sometimes. It's so niche, but it has its moments. And that, ironically, Hirsch sent me a screenshot of him doing exactly that, like 2 hours after I mentioned it. But all the other hits are fantastic. Like Guile is really good. Noxian Tailstones are really good. Bilgewater Tailstones give you access to rally is really good. Even a vulnerable pull or just setting up 2 kegs for a TF red card. There's some really, really good spells. And having a 1/3 body lets you block or just jam your Reveler's Feast onto something and then continue with the 6-wide attack without losing a unit. And then my third deck would probably be Trist, Pirates. It's probably either Fearsomes or, yeah, probably Fearsomes is where I'm at right now. I think Fearsomes are pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Monte. So I haven't really been able to play too much, and I kind of understand. Like I've played like little to no Broadmane. I haven't gone up against a lot of Broadmane. I've done like a little Ryze and everything. So I picked up Fearsomes, and I've been doing well with Fearsomes. Like, this deck seems good. How do I build like a lineup around that? So I went literally the same direction. I said Fearsomes, and then I looked at Tristana, and then I looked at Pirate, and I was like, okay, this is good. And then smoked a ton of people on the gauntlets with it, which we talked about gauntlets, but it seemed to be working, and it was doing what a triple aggro lineup does. And I think if I put more time into the season as of right now, I probably would have gone like a triple control kind of lineup instead and looked more towards like, again, the Trist SI, put time into Broadmane, look somewhere there. But as of right now, definitely leaning towards like Fearsomes, Tristnox, and Pirates.
Yeah, I'd probably just playing the same lineup I played last weekend because I don't think the meta shifted enough to push me off of a minimum of 6 Broadmane. So it'd be at least 6 Broadmane. It'd be at least like the PNG Broadmane and then the Nora Broadmane. And then the third deck is either Ryze or it's the Bilgewater Broadmane. It just really depends on like how much I'm afraid of triple aggro and like how much do I actually think aggro or Ryze can get targeted. And it's like, how much does the teching really matter? Because if like right now it's like super hard teched for aggro with like triple tasty, triple eye, triple claws, and then a jury rig and a like Shuriman Tailstones. And like, if that isn't enough to make me not lose to aggro, then I'm probably just on 9x Broadmane. But if that amount card combination is enough to help me like not consistently lose, like it makes me not 80-20 essentially, then I'm down to just like shove Ryze as my third slot. So it's definitely 6 Broadmane or 6x Broadmane, and then it's either Ryze or 9x Broadmane.
It's definitely not triple aggro.
Yeah.
I couldn't be asked to play that. I'll probably Ryze. I don't actually know. I haven't been playing a whole lot either, but I might just pick up the Broadmane decks. Cat Gwen is actually still a decent deck. So I'm not sure how it matches. Definitely not good until like Nora, especially. But it's better into the other two than the Nora matchup. But yeah, I'll probably just bring some combination of Ryze, Broadmane decks, Cat Gwen, and Tristana SI.
All right. Well, if you made it this far and you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that button and tell us what you thought about the video in the comments. And be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed it. We'll see you all next time. Thank you again to my guests, Mo and Swiffer, for joining us. Bye-bye.